We were sitting in my kitchen at 2 a.m., lights off, drinking coffee because neither of us could sleep. He kept glancing at the window like he was expecting something to be standing outside. "If I ever show up at your place without warning," he said, "don't open the door." I laughed, assuming he was messing with me. He wasn't. "If I knock, if I call, if I text asking to come in, don't," he said. "And if I sound desperate, it means something went wrong." That's when I stopped laughing. I asked him why he would say something like that. He told me about a hiking trip he had taken up north. He went alone deep into the forest locals avoided. No trails, no signs, just trees that looked all the same no matter how far you walked. On the third day, he realized something was moving with him, not chasing him, matching his speed. When he stopped, it stopped. When he walked, it walked. Eventually, he saw it standing between two trees, half hidden, like it hadn't fully decided what shape it was supposed to be. It was almost human, he said. Almost. Too tall, arms a little too long, its head tilted, like it was listening for instructions. When it spoke, it used his voice, but the words came out wrong, like it learned how to talk by watching someone through glass. "Help me, I'm lost." He ran. That night, it stood outside his tent. It never touched it. It just practiced, repeating his name over and over, changing the tone each time. Calm, panicked, angry, laughing, and crying. By morning, there were 2 sets of footprints leading away from the campsite. Only one set came back. When he finished telling me this, he looked smaller somehow, like something had been taken out of him. "It followed me home," he said. "Not right away. It waited." I told him he needed to rest. I even suggested talking to someone. He grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. "If I come to you," he said, eyes wide, "it means it figured me out." He left before sunrise. 2 days later, he stopped answering his phone. A week after that, I got a text from his number. "Can I crash at your house tonight?" No punctuation, no nickname. He always used both. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another message. "Please, man, I really need help." That night, I locked my door. There was a knock. 3 slow taps. Familiar rhythm. I didn't move. From the hallway outside my apartment, his voice spoke perfectly steady. "I know you're awake." I stayed silent. Something shifted on the other side of the door. A long breath, then softer. "I told you this would happen." The handle turned. It didn't open, but it turned. The next morning, I checked my phone. There was one last text sent at 4:12 a.m. "It's better at being me now." An hour later, my neighbor asked why my friend had been standing outside my door all night. He said he never moved. He said he just stood there, smiling. Whatever came back wasn't my friend. I've dealt with sleep paralysis for most of my life. Back in high school, it happened a lot. Almost always the same way. I'd dream I was standing at the edge of a cliff, unable to move, while someone laughed behind me. Then I'd be shoved forward, falling endlessly until I woke up. At first, it terrified me. Eventually, it just got old. Over time, I learned the warning signs. Pressure in my chest, the spike of panic, feeling that my body was about to lock up. If I caught it early enough, I could force myself awake before things got bad. For years, that was all it was. Just an inconvenience. Then, a few years ago, at my old apartment, something changed. Out of boredom one night, I downloaded an app called Necrophonic. I'd seen people online messing with it, claiming it picked up strange sounds or voices. I didn't really believe any of it. I just thought it was something creepy to play around with. I really wish I had left it alone. About a week later, I had a dream. It started normal enough. I was with a woman. Everything felt realistic, too realistic. Then, without warning, her skin began to change. It turned pale, almost gray, and started decaying right in front of me, like something rotting and fast forward. I shoved her away in panic. That's when I noticed something worse. Behind her, the earlier part of the dream was playing again, like a projection on a wall. The exact moment from before, looping silently. Everything else around was just completely dark. She stared at me and started growling. Low, slow, and deliberate. I felt that familiar rush of panic hit all at once. My chest tightened, my limbs felt heavy. I knew sleep paralysis was seconds away. I forced myself awake. I lay there in the dark afterward, heart racing, afraid to close my eyes again. It took hours before I finally drifted back to sleep. When I did, I was somewhere else. I was standing inside a narrow, claustrophobic building. The walls felt too close, like the space was shrinking. At the end of the hallway was a door. I opened it and stepped outside. Beyond it was a wide grassy field, stretched endlessly, with a single road cutting through it. Standing on that road was that same pale woman. She wasn't moving. She was just watching me. The panic hit immediately, stronger than before. I tried to wake myself up, and as I did, I heard her scream, long and sharp, right as I regained consciousness. Another week passed. This time, the dream put me inside an old antique shop. The air felt heavy. Every object inside felt wrong, like it didn't belong in the same reality as me. Behind the counter stood a strange, round humanoid figure. Its eyes followed me as I looked around. When it finally spoke, its voice was calm. "Don't go out there," it said. "She's waiting for you." Through the glass door, I saw a pale woman standing outside, closer than before. When I forced myself awake this time, something felt different. I felt my foot being pulled downward. My body shifted. My face lifted off the pillow before dropping back down onto the mattress. I was fully awake. That was the last incident. After I moved out of that apartment, everything stopped. No more dreams, no more paralysis. But during that time, my roommate's dogs would randomly get scared, especially when I was home alone. They'd come into my room, shaking, refusing to leave my side. I never used that app again. And I still don't know if it was coincidence or if something realized I was paying attention. Thanks for watching. If you have a true story, send it to acestruestories@gmail.com. If you have an idea for a future video, leave a comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, there's always another story. I was a firefighter for 8 years. During that time, I learned something important. Smoke lies. But it also tells the truth when you least want it to. We got a call just after 9 p.m., light smoke showing at a single-story home in a quiet neighborhood. No flames, no urgency, a routine check. When we pulled up, the homeowner was outside, barefoot, hugging her arms like she was freezing. She told us she thought her husband was still inside. "He was standing in the living room window," she said, "but he wouldn't answer me." She pointed to the window. It looked normal, no movement, no shadows. We geared up and went in. Inside, the smoke wasn't thick, just a haze drifting across the ceiling like a layer of fog. But enough that the house felt smaller, darker, quieter. We moved through the living room. My boots creaked on the wood floors. The house had a heavy, wrong kind of silence that doesn't match the level of smoke. Halfway across the room, I heard a footstep behind me. Not mine, and not my partner's. A single step, like someone shifted their weight. I turned my flashlight toward the corner of the room. I saw a man standing there, facing the wall, hands to his side, completely still. I raised my voice. "Sir, fire department, are you injured?" He didn't respond, didn't move, didn't even twitch. My partner whispered, "You see that, right?" I nodded. We stepped closer. When my light caught the floor around his feet, I noticed something odd. There was no smoke drifting between his legs. It parted around him, like he was weight, but also like he wasn't really there. We got within 10 feet. That's when the temperature changed. Not heat from the fire. Cold. A sudden drop. The kind that makes your hands tighten on your gear. We took one more step, and the figure dissolved into the smoke. Not stepped away, not ran, just broke apart like mist. My partner swore under his breath. We swept the entire living room, nothing behind the furniture, nothing behind the entertainment stand, nothing near the hallway. We checked the kitchen, bedroom, the bathroom. No sign of anyone. We radioed command and requested confirmation on occupant status. Command returned and said, "The homeowner says her husband's been at the neighbor's house for the last few hours." We stared at each other for a second. That wasn't a misunderstanding. We both saw someone. We continued the search anyway. Protocol. When we got to the back of the house, near the laundry room, I found something strange. Smaller footprints, maybe child size, burned into the dust on the tile floor. But the tile wasn't hot. Nothing was burning back there. And the prints were fresh. My partner called out from the living room, "Hey, come look at this." When I got back to him, he pointed at the inside of the front window, the one the homeowner claimed her husband had been standing at. Clear as day on the glass were 3 long streaks, like someone had pressed their fingertips down the window, then dragged them slowly toward the floor. I shined my light to check for heat marks or damage. Nothing. No smudges, no oils, just faint streaks in the residue of the smoke. We finished the sweep and backed out, letting the ventilation fans clear the house. As we walked the homeowner through what we had found, her husband came around the corner of the house, out of breath. He kept saying he didn't know what she meant by standing in the window. He said he hadn't been inside for hours. She pointed at the smudges on the glass. His face went pale. That got my attention, so I asked him quietly, "Have you ever seen anything strange in the room before?" He didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands like he was debating saying it out loud. Finally he said, "When I was a kid, I used to see someone standing in that same corner every night. My parents said it was sleep paralysis, but I wasn't sleeping." We cleared the scene and left. But about an hour later, back at the station, I got a call forward from dispatch. It was the homeowner. She asked if the smoke could ever twist into shapes. I told her it can. Smoke does weird things. Then she asked, "Can smoke ever knock on a wall?" I didn't have an answer for that. She said something had tapped 3 times on the bedroom wall after we left, and that the streaks on the window had gotten darker, like someone pressed their hand there again. We went back the next morning to check for lingering heat spots or electrical issues. There weren't any. But in the corner of the living room, the same corner we saw the figure, the floor was covered in a fresh layer of ash. Just at the corner, nowhere else. Like something had been standing there, watching. I've seen fires do strange things. I've seen smoke twist into illusions. But I've never seen something that left marks after we were gone. I don't know who or what was in that house, but I know one thing. Whatever it was, whatever we saw in that corner, it wasn't smoke. If you're still watching, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. Hit the like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I was sent on a welfare check on a house neighbors wouldn't stop calling about. They said nobody lived there for over 6 months, but at random hours, lights would turn on and off. Sometimes they'd hear footsteps. Sometimes they'd see shadows moving past the front windows. I've cleared plenty of empty homes before. Most of the time it's kids, drug users, or somebody's relative who forgot to mention they had a key. So I wasn't nervous, just curious. When I pulled up, the place looked exactly like you'd expect for a house that'd been sitting. Overgrown yard, mailbox stuffed, paint peeling near the porch, every curtain drawn. I walked up, knocked on the door, and called out, "Police department, anybody inside?" No answer. I listened for a second. The neighborhood was dead quiet. Then, from inside the house, I heard it. A single footstep. It was faint, but it was there. Not the pipes, not the house settling. It had weight to it. I called out louder, "Police department, if anyone's in there, make yourself known." Nothing. I tried the knob. Locked. We had a key on file from when the bank repossessed the property, so I used that and stepped inside. The air felt colder than it should have. Dust coated everything in a thin layer. The living room looked like it had been cleared out in a hurry. No couch, no TV, just marks on the carpet where furniture used to be. I shut the door behind me and stood still for a moment, listening. Another footstep. This time, I could tell it was from further back in the house. I started down the hallway. There were 3 doors. A bathroom, what looked like a small bedroom, and at the very end, a door with a deadbolt and a chain latch above it. The bathroom was empty and spotless in a way that looked almost wrong. The toothbrush holder, no toothbrushes, shower curtain gone, like someone had cleared the room out and never came back. The bedroom was the opposite. Stacks of old newspaper in the corner, a cheap mattress on the floor with no sheets, empty hangers in the closet. It felt like someone had tried to live there illegally for a while and then suddenly left. I stepped back in the hall. Another step, heavier now, from under my boots. That's when I realized the sound wasn't coming from another room. It was coming from below me. The locked door at the end of the hall was to the basement. The deadbolt was on the side, the chain was latched. Nobody should have been able to go down there without unlocking it, and nobody could come back up without taking the chain off. I unlatched it and eased the door open. The stairwell was dark. I shined my flashlight down. Dust was everywhere, except for a single trail of footprints leading down the middle of the stairs. Bare feet, adult-sized. Deep enough to tell they weren't old. Whoever made them hadn't come back up. I radioed in that I was checking a basement and started descending. Each step creaked in a way that made it hard to tell if the noise was mine or something else moving. The basement opened up into one large, unfinished room. Concrete floor, stone walls, and wooden support beams. My light swept across the space. There's no furniture, no boxes, no tools, just emptiness. The footprints continued from the base of the stairs, straight across the floor, all the way to the back wall, and then they stopped. Not turned, not scattered, just ended at solid concrete. I walked the entire perimeter, no second door, no crawl spaces, no windows, nothing. It felt wrong standing there, like I was late to something that had already happened. I followed the prints back with my light, just to make sure I wasn't missing a turn or a scuff. Same thing, straight line, straight to the wall, nowhere else. I called out again. This time my voice sounded too loud in the bare room. "If someone's down here, you need to answer me." Silence. Well, almost silence. Right after my voice died off, I heard another sound. It wasn't a footstep this time. It was a slow dragging noise above me. like someone was sliding their hand along the length of the hallway wall upstairs. I went back up. The chain latch was hanging loose now. I know I unhooked it, but I was sure I hadn't left it swinging like that. It was moving just slightly, like it had just been brushed a second before I opened the door. The hallway looked the same as before, except for one thing. There were now faint dust streaks along the wall at shoulder height, like someone had walked by, steadying themselves with their hand. Those streaks went past the bathroom door, past the bedroom, and stopped right in front of the basement door where I was standing. Dispatch radioed me asking for an update. I told them the house looked clear, but weird, like someone had been there and then vanished. The operator hesitated and said, "Neighbors just called back. They say they've been seeing people standing in the basement window for the last few nights." I almost told them what I already realized. The basement doesn't have any windows. I walked the outside of the house just to double check, just in case I missed some half-buried glass cutout. Solid foundations on all sides, no openings. When I went back in to do one last sweep, something small changed that made my skin crawl more than anything else that night. The footprints on the basement stairs, the ones going down, now had a matching set going back up. Same size, same spacing, same bare feet. They hadn't been there 20 minutes earlier. I followed them to the top of the stairs, heart rate finally kicking up for the first time on the call. They left faint marks on the hallway floorboard and stopped right at the front door. But the deadbolt was still locked. Chain still latched. No doors open. No windows unlocked. No signs of forced entry. I cleared the house one more time, then called it as vacant. On paper, it was nothing. No suspect, no victim, no crime. Just a welfare check. But I think about that house every time I get sent to clear a vacant building now. Prints that went to a wall that never came back. The second set that appeared after I left. The neighbor insisting they saw someone in a window that doesn't exist. I don't scare easy. I've been in worse situations. But the basement, that one felt like someone was always one step ahead of me. And I'm not sure they ever left. I was working EMS when we got a call from an older woman just after 11 a.m. Her voice was calm, too calm for someone calling to say her husband wouldn't wake up. Calm is never good. Panic means you still believe we can help. Calm usually means they already know we can't. When we arrived, the front door was cracked open like she had been expecting us. She wasn't pacing, she wasn't sobbing. She was just standing in the hallway, hands folded neatly in front of her. "He's upstairs," she said. She spoke like she was reminding us where the bathroom was, not like someone announcing a death. We went up the stairs, and the house felt stale, like the air hadn't moved since early morning. Sunlight was coming through the blinds, but it didn't warm the hallway at all. Her husband was lying on the bed in the master bedroom. Eyes closed, no distress on his face. We checked the vitals. He was gone. Had been for a while. I asked her gently, "When did you find him like this?" She looked right past me towards the hallway and said, 9 this morning. It was almost noon. I asked why she waited to call. She didn't answer right away. Instead, her eyes followed the length of the hallway, not scanning, but tracking someone. Finally, she said, "I had to wait." I asked, "Wait for what?" She kept staring down the hall. For him to stop walking around. At that moment, I felt the room shift a little. The way she said it, too normal, too certain. I tried to clarify. "Ma'am, what do you mean by walking around?" She sighed like this was the part she hated explaining. "It's just something he does after he dies. He walks the hallway for a while. Not did. Not did once. Does. Present tense. I assumed she meant dreams or memories, or maybe she was coping in her own way. People grieve strangely sometimes. But she kept talking. It happened last time too. I froze at that line. Last time? We didn't press her. Grief can hit in odd ways, and sometimes people say things they don't mean literally. We did our job, confirmed time of death, filed a report, and contacted the funeral home. She thanked us, quiet and polite, but she didn't follow us downstairs. She stayed right at the top of the stairs, looking down the hallway again, tracing something we couldn't see. When we reached the bottom, I looked back up. She was still staring, not at us, at the floorboards, like someone was walking past her, one slow step at a time. We left, but halfway down the walkway, her front door closed behind us. Not a slam, just a soft, deliberate push. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to look back up at the second floor window. The curtains moved, not open, just enough to suggest someone was standing behind them, but the wife was still upstairs, and her silhouette was nowhere near the window. When we got back to the ambulance, my partner broke the silence first. You heard her say last time, right? I nodded. We finished our shift and filed our call normally. But after midnight, when I was home and getting ready for bed, I got a message from dispatch asking if we had returned to the residence after the call. We hadn't. Dispatch said the wife had called back around 3 p.m. She sounded shaken. Said she heard footsteps in the hallway again, louder than before. Slow, steady, walking the length of the house. She said she thought it was us checking on her, but she realized it wasn't when the steps came right up to the bedroom door and stopped. Dead still. She said she waited for them to move again. They didn't. Not until just before she hung up. 3 slow steps, heading back down the hall. She asked dispatch if we could send an officer to check the house, but that wasn't the part that bothered dispatch. The part that bothered them was the last thing she said. He only stops walking after he realizes he's dead, and today, he forgot longer than usual. I don't know what happened in that house. I'm not saying it was paranormal. I'm not saying it wasn't. But that woman's calmness, her certainty, and the way she watched the hallway like someone was still pacing it, that stuck with me more than the call itself. Some people are afraid of losing their loved ones. She seemed afraid of losing something else entirely. This story comes from a woman named Marissa. She was 27 when it happened, driving across state lines to visit her sister. It was late, close to 1 a.m. when she pulled off the highway to fuel up. She hated stopping at night, but her car was running low and the next station was 40 miles away. The place she pulled into was one of those old, half-forgotten gas stations stuck between 2 towns. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzing over empty pumps. A convenience store with lights still on, but no cars out front. And that strange quiet you only hear in places that should be busy, but aren't. She took a deep breath, got out, and locked her car behind her. As she started pumping gas, she kept glancing around. The feeling came out of nowhere. That prickling sense between your shoulder blades telling you you're not alone. She told herself she was being dramatic. Just get the gas and leave. The pump clicked off. She reached for the nozzle and froze. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement. Low movement. Something sliding across the pavement from underneath the car parked at the next pump over. Her breath caught. She turned her head very slightly and saw a man crawling out from under the car beside hers. Not on his hands and knees, on his elbows and forearms. Slow, careful, deliberate, like he didn't want the sound of his shoes scraping across the pavement to give him away. His face was down, hidden by the shadow of the car. His clothes were a dark hoodie and jeans. But the thing that hit her hardest was how practiced the movement looked. It wasn't a guy checking something under his car. It was someone who'd done this before. He crawled to the back bumper of the neighboring car, paused, then aligned himself towards her car, towards her. Her throat tightened. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She watched him through the reflection in her window, safer than turning and looking directly. He kept crawling, closer and closer, until he was only a few feet away from the driver's side door. That's when he lifted his head, just enough to look towards her car window. She didn't see his face, only the pale line of his jaw, and the unmistakable awareness that he knew she was there, and that he wasn't surprised. He slowly got onto his knee, moving deliberately, quietly, and reached for her car door handle. That's when instinct hit her like lightning. She grabbed the nozzle, yanked it out, and jumped into the car so fast she scraped her knee on the door frame. She slammed the door and hit the lock button 3 times. The man stood up fully now. He wasn't hiding his face anymore. He grinned. Not wide, not cartoonish. Just a slow, creepy smile, like he had wanted her to see that he had been waiting for her to notice him. He stepped toward the driver's window. Marissa fumbled for her keys starting the car and threw it in reverse. Her headlights flashed across him for 1 second, just one, and she saw it clearly. He had been under cars before. His clothes were covered in dust, oil, and tiny black flecks from countless undercarriages. Like this was his method, his routine, his thing. She reversed hard, nearly hitting the gas pump behind her, then sped out of the station without looking back. Her heart was pounding so hard she felt it in her teeth. She got back on the highway and didn't stop until she reached the toll booth 15 miles away. With shaking hands, she told the attendant what she saw. The attendant listened, then leaned out of the booth and looked down the dark highway like he expected to see somebody following. He said quietly, "You're not the first person to say that. We're getting calls about a guy hiding under cars at night. Not robbing people, not breaking windows, just waiting." He swallowed. And it also happens at the same gas station. Marissa never stopped there again. Never stopped at any quiet gas station, actually. Not after that night. Because she realized something. The man wasn't choosing his victims on the road. He was choosing them in silence from underneath the shadows, waiting for the moment they were most vulnerable. And if she had bent down to pick up something she had dropped, or taken a few more seconds to twist the gas cap on, he would have been right behind her, close enough to touch. If you're still watching, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. Hit the like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. This story was sent in by a man named Trevor. He was 24 at the time, driving home after a late shift at a warehouse job. It was close to 2 a.m. A long, empty highway through farmland with only 2 exits in 30 miles. He'd driven it 100 times, knew every curve, every reflector post, every patch of darkness. But this time, something felt off. He didn't know why, just a heaviness in his chest, like his body sensed something coming before his mind did. The night was pitch black, no moon, no cars, just the hum of his engine and the occasional road sign flashing past in his headlights. About 20 minutes into the drive, he saw something up ahead, a van, pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. The van was old, one of those boxy white models with no windows on the side. The hood was up, and a man stood at the front waving his arms like he was desperate. Trevor slowed, He didn't want to. Every instinct told him to keep driving, but he also didn't want to leave someone stranded in the middle of nowhere. He eased off the gas and rolled down the window halfway. The man jogged toward the driver's side. Something about him was wrong. Not his face. Trevor couldn't see it well. Not his clothes. Dark jacket, jeans, nothing strange. It was the way he moved. Too excited. Too eager. Like he had been waiting for a car for a long time. Trevor kept his foot on the brake. "You need help?" he called out. The man slowed down when he got close. He smiled, but not in a relieved way, but like he finally got what he wanted. "Yeah," the man said. "My van broke down. I just need a quick hand. Could you come take a look?" Trevor's stomach tightened. No please. No explanation. No details. Just come take a look. Something told him not to get out. "Maybe I can call someone for you," Trevor offered instead. The man shook his head too fast. "Phones don't work out here. I tried. Just come look. It'll just take a second." Trevor glanced at the van. The back doors were cracked open an inch. Not wide, just barely, but enough to see movement inside. A shadow shifting, then still. Like someone, or more than one person, was crouched inside, waiting. Trevor's heart slammed against his ribs. He kept his voice steady. "Sorry, man. I can call Highway Patrol once I hit the next exit." He started rolling his window up. The man stepped forward quickly and slammed his hand against the glass. "Don't leave." Trevor's blood ran cold. He hit the gas on instinct, the man's hand sliding off the glass as Trevor sped away. But in his rearview mirror, Trevor saw two men sprinting out of the tall grass on the passenger side of the road. They had been hiding there, waiting for him to step out of his car, waiting to surround him, waiting for a victim. As Trevor accelerated, the first man, the one who waved him down, ran into the road and shouted something he couldn't hear. Then he did something that made Trevor's entire body prickle. He smiled. Wide. Almost relieved. Like Trevor escaping wasn't a failure to him, but just part of whatever they were doing. Trevor didn't look back again, not until he reached the next exit. He pulled into a gas station parking lot, locked his doors, and dialed 911. 2 highway patrol cars were sent to check the area. A half hour later, an officer returned his call. "Sir?" the officer said carefully. There was no broken down van on that stretch of road. Trevor insisted he saw it. Saw the men, saw the hood up. The officer paused. "We did find tire tracks pulled off onto the grass. And footprints, a lot of footprints, but no van." Trevor didn't sleep that night, but the part that still sits with him is what the officers said at the very end of the call, just as he was about to hang up. By the way, there have been reports recently of people staging breakdowns on rural highways to rob and abduct drivers. But in every case we responded to, the suspect moved their vehicle before we arrive. He paused. Whoever you saw out there tonight, they weren't stuck. Trevor drives that highway every weekend now. But he never stops for anyone, not even in broad daylight, because he knows people don't need help. They're just waiting for someone who doesn't see the movement in the grass. This story was sent in by a woman named Claire. She was 19 years old when this happened, driving home from her college campus for the weekend. It was one of those long, empty highway stretches with nothing around but woods on both sides. Just 2 lanes, no exits for miles, and no other cars in sight. The kind of road that feels like it doesn't end, just keeps sliding under your headlights forever. It was a little after midnight. She had her music on low, windows up, cruise control set to 65. Everything felt peaceful. Then, she looked in her rearview mirror and saw a pair of headlights cresting the hill behind her. Nothing unusual at first. Cars pass, people drive late. But something about the way it moved made her uneasy. The car came up fast, too fast, far faster than people going this road normally drive. She gripped the wheel a little tighter. The headlights got bigger, brighter, closer, until the car settled right behind her. Not tailgating, but close enough that she could see the shape of the driver's head silhouetted through the windshield. She switched lanes. The car followed, instantly. She told herself it was a coincidence, maybe a sleepy driver. Maybe they wanted to pass. But they didn't pass. They stayed behind her, perfectly, exactly matching her speed. She'd speed up, so did they. She'd slow down, so did they. She moved into the right lane and flicked her blinker to take the next exit, a last-ditch attempt to shake the feeling in her chest. The driver swerved abruptly, cutting into the right lane in one sharp movement, staying behind her like they were connected. That's when the fear started. Not panic, but that steady burn in your stomach that tells you something's wrong. The exit she planned to take passed by too fast. She couldn't get off without having the car right behind her in the turn. She didn't trust them being that close, so she stayed on the highway. 5 minutes passed. 10. The car never left her rear bumper. The road stayed empty except for the two of them, her in front and the stranger behind her, matching her every move like a shadow she couldn't outrun. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking, and called her mom first. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. So she did the things she had been avoiding. She dialed 911. Her voice was shaking as she explained that someone was following her, refusing to pass, mirroring her every move. The dispatcher asked if the car had tried to signal her. No. Had they flashed their lights? No. Had they pulled up alongside her? No. Just stayed behind her, locked in. The dispatcher's tone changed. It went from professional to quietly urgent. Ma'am, do not stop your vehicle. Do you hear me? Do not pull over under any circumstances. Claire swallowed hard. Yes, I won't. I'm sending units to intercept you, but it may take time. I need you to stay calm, stay on the highway, and keep your speed steady. Can you do that? I think so. The dispatcher stayed on the line. Claire kept driving. 15 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. 40 miles of highway. 40 miles of the same headlights glued to her bumper. Somewhere along the drive, the lights behind her flickered. Just once. A signal? Before she could ask the dispatcher what to do, the dispatcher said suddenly, 2 state troopers are approaching from behind. They're going to pass you on your left. Claire's heartbeat thundered in her ears. 2 sets of red and blue lights appeared behind the follower car. They surged forward, roaring past both vehicles. 1 trooper got in front of Claire. 1 stayed behind the car, tailing her. The dispatcher told her calmly, stay in your lane and do not stop until you're instructed. The troopers slowed down, boxing the follower car between them, forcing it to brake. Eventually, they got the driver to the shoulder. Claire watched the scene shrink in her rearview mirror until she lost sight of it entirely. She was told to take the next exit and wait at the gas station with her doors locked until an officer met her. When the trooper finally arrived, he asked her only one question. When did you first notice the car behind you? She told him everything, the speed, the lane changes, the matching movements, the 40 miles of fear. The trooper listened quietly, then sighed. We've been tracking that car for weeks, he said. We believe the driver has been following lone female motorists on the highways. Never made a move, never confronted anyone, just followed, and kept following. Claire asked him the question she'd been dreading. What did he want? The officer stared at her for a moment before answering. We don't know, but when we pulled him over tonight, he refused to get out of the car, just kept staring at your vehicle driving away. She felt her stomach twist. The officer continued, And Claire, this is the part I don't want to scare you with, but you deserve the truth. He paused. When we asked him why he was following you, he said he wasn't following you. She frowned. What? Then who? The officer closed his notebook. He said he was following the person in your passenger seat. Claire froze. There's no one else in the car. She had driven alone the entire night. No passengers, no hitchhikers, no shadows. Just her. The officer must have seen the look on her face because he added quickly, He's not well. We think he's delusional. But Claire couldn't stop thinking about that moment. The way the follower car matched her every move. The 40 miles of lockstep precision. The refusal to pass her or pull alongside her. Like he wasn't watching her. He was watching something he thought was sitting next to her. She never drove that stretch of highway again. Not at night. Not alone. And no matter who rides with her now, she always checks the passenger seat twice. I don't care if people believe me or not. I write my experiences for your entertainment. Believe what you will. This happened a little over 10 years ago. I never had the best relationship with my dad, so when it came time to move in with him, I was already dreading it. To make matters worse, my sister, who we'll call Jane, warned me about the room I'd be staying in. The place was an old Victorian place with high ceilings and a creaky floor. Jane told me that during her stay, a few strange things happened, the kind you can't easily explain. One night, while she was downstairs with the dog, a CD player upstairs turned on by itself. She went up, turned it off, and came back down, only for the dog to start growling at the empty seat beside her. Then, the CD player started again. She unplugged it, but it came on full blast. She bolted out the house with the dog and never stayed there again. Naturally, hearing that didn't make me excited to move in, but I didn't have a choice. My dad and I went back to our usual pattern, him yelling and me hiding in my room. That's when things started happening to me. Cupboards opening on their own, light bulbs falling straight down from the socket, door handles turning by themselves. The scariest moment came one night while I was playing games. There was a loud bang outside the room. The attic hatch had slammed open so hard it dented the wall. My dad blamed me, even though I couldn't even reach it if I tried. It was 7 feet high. I was barely 5'5". The next day I tested it, pushed it up, let it drop. It didn't even touch the wall. There was no way it could have done that by itself. From then on, I avoided walking under the hatch. But one night, while brushing my teeth, I watched it swing open again. Nobody else was home. I ran down the stairs, skipping half the stairs on the way down. I never went back. For years after, small things followed me. Doors creaked open, lights flickering, but eventually it all stopped. It's been quiet ever since, and I pray that it stays that way. People always say, you can tell when you're not alone in your own home. I used to laugh at that until it happened to me. The year was 2018. I had just moved into a small rental outside Tacoma, Washington. It was the kind of place you take because it's cheap, not because it feels right. The attic hatch was in the hallway, just above the front door. One of those wooden panels that never quite sits flush. The first 2 weeks were fine, quiet. But then, little things started bothering me. I'd leave a loaf of bread on the counter, come home, find it half gone. Light switches I was certain I'd turned off were on again. My thermostat kept changing overnight. Just a few degrees, but enough to notice. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was forgetful. Maybe the place was drafty. Until one night, around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps. Not the creak of pipes or the sound of house settling. Real footsteps, slow, deliberate, directly above my bedroom ceiling. I held my breath. The steps moved across the attic, stopped right above me, then shifted again. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and whispered, "Hello?" Silence. Then a single, soft thump. The next morning, I checked the attic hatch. It was cracked open. Not enough to notice at a glance, but enough to tell someone had pulled it down. My stomach dropped. I called a friend, put them on speaker, climbed on a chair, and slowly pushed the hatch upward. The smell hit me first. Stale sweat and dust. I aimed my flashlight and froze. A sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, half a bottle of water, and a flashlight laying on its side. Someone had been living in my attic. I backed away and dialed 911. The police arrived, searched the attic, the crawl space, the yard. Nothing. Whoever it was, they were gone. They found scuff marks near the back window, small enough for someone to climb in and out of quietly. I moved out 2 weeks later. For a while, I couldn't sleep. Every little noise sounded like someone moving above me again. Even now, in my new place, I still look up before bed. Because once you've heard someone walking around above you, you never really stop listening for it. There's a special kind of fear that only hits when you realize the danger was already inside your house. I lived in my apartment for about 6 months. Small, second floor, quiet neighborhood. My landlord told me the attic was sealed, nothing to worry about. I believed him, until one Tuesday evening. I came home from work, kicked off my shoes, and dropped my keys on the counter. As I turned toward the hallway, I noticed something off. The attic door, the little square panel above my head, was hanging slightly open, just a few inches, enough to show the black gap beyond. I froze. I hadn't been up there. I didn't even own a ladder. I waited. The house was silent. No movement, no sound. I told myself it was air pressure, or maybe the building shifting. But that night, as I tried to fall asleep, I kept hearing faint scuffing, like something dragging across wood. The next morning, I told my landlord. He brushed it off. Old hinges, nothing to worry about. A few days later, I came home again. The attic door was open wider. I stood there for 5 minutes, staring up at it, my heart racing. Then I grabbed the longest broom I owned and pushed the door shut. That night, I moved the kitchen table underneath it, and I stacked a chair on top of it, like that would stop whatever it was. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a soft thud, then another. The next morning, the table was pushed back against the wall, the chair on the floor. The latch was open again. I called the landlord and demanded he come check. He arrived with a flashlight and climbed up. The smell hit us both immediately. Musty, warm, and wrong. He shined the light around and went silent. Up there were footprints, clear as day, pressed into the insulation. Not animal prints, human. The landlord sealed the hatch shut with screws and a lock plate that same afternoon. I finished my lease, but never once slept easy again. To this day, if I hear a creak in the ceiling, or see a shadow where there shouldn't be one, I look up. just to make sure the attic door is still closed. I usually keep my CB radio on low. Most of the time, it's just mindless chatter. Drivers complaining about traffic, warning each other about the bears or the police, or just shooting the breeze to stay awake. It's a comfort thing. It reminds you that you're not the only soul out there on the asphalt at 3 a.m. I was crossing the panhandle of Texas, heading west. If you've ever driven it, you know it's a flat, featureless void. No trees, no hills, just blackness and the occasional blinking light of a wind turbine. I was about halfway between Amarillo and the New Mexico border when the static from Channel 19 cleared up. Usually, the signal fades in and out, but this time it was crystal clear.
"That's a nice rig you got there, driver,"
a voice said. It was deep, slow, and had a slight rasp to it. "Thanks, buddy. She's treating me well. Who am I talking to?" There was a pause.
"Just a fan. I like the red glow in your cab. Matches the tail lights."
I looked down at my dash. I had installed some aftermarket red LED strips under the footwells a few weeks prior. They weren't bright, and from the outside, you'd have to be sitting right level with my window to see them. I checked my mirrors. There was nobody behind me. No headlights, no silhouettes, nothing but the empty highway. "Where are you, driver?" I asked, my voice a bit tighter. "I don't see your lights."
"I'm close enough,"
the voice crackled.
"I like the photo you have taped to the sun visor. The one with the little girl in the yellow dress. She has your eyes."
I felt a surge of cold adrenaline. My daughter's photo is 4 inches wide. It's tucked behind the visor. You can't see it from the road. You can barely see it from the passenger seat. The only way to see that photo is to be inside the cab. I didn't respond. I reached over and clicked the CB off. My heart was thudding against my ribs. I checked the lock on my door, even though I knew it was engaged. I kept my eyes on the road, praying for a gas station or a town. Suddenly, the CB clicked on. I hadn't touched the dial. The power light was green, and the volume had been maxed out.
"Don't be rude, Mart,"
the voice boomed. The static was gone entirely now. It sounded like the person was sitting in the seat next to me.
"I was just getting to the best part. I like the way you leave your window cracked exactly 2 inches when you sleep at the Flying J. That makes it so much easier to hear you breathe."
I grabbed my CB mic and ripped it out of the dashboard, wires and all. The radio went dark. I was shaking so hard I can barely keep the truck in the lane. My name is Mark, but I don't have it on my shirt, my hat, or my truck. I didn't stop. I drove straight through to Albuquerque, nearly running out of fuel. I pulled into a bright, busy terminal and stayed in the driver's lounge until the sun came up. I refused to go back to my truck alone. I eventually went back to the rig with a couple other drivers I knew. We searched every inch of the cab. We looked under the bunk, in the cabinets, and even checked the vents. Nothing. But when I went to put my daughter's photo back in my wallet, I noticed something. On the back of the photo, someone had written a time and a date in black marker. It was the time and date of the following night at 3:15 a.m. The time was only 6 hours away. I didn't stay in the truck that night. I stayed in a hotel with a deadbolt and a security guard. At exactly 3:15 a.m., my cell phone buzzed. It was a restricted number, and I didn't answer it, but they left a voicemail. I played it the next morning. It was 30 seconds of silence, followed by the sound of a CB radio clicking off, and then the same raspy voice whispering, "You're late, Mart. I'm already at the next stop." I don't use the CB anymore. I had the whole system pulled out of my truck. People ask me why I don't want the extra safety of the radio, and I just tell them I prefer the silence. But in truth, I'm afraid that if I turn it on, I'll hear him again. And I'm afraid that this time, he won't be talking about the photo on my visor. He'll be talking about what I'm doing right now. I've been an owner-operator for 6 years. I mostly haul flatbed loads through the Midwest, heavy machinery, steel coils, things that require a lot of strapping and consistent checking. I'm used to the quirks of my rig, a 2016 Peterbilt that I keep in immaculate condition. I know every rattle, every hiss of the air brakes, every hum of the tires. It was November, and I was cutting through a rural stretch of Missouri on my way to drop off in St. Louis. The sun had been down for hours, and the fog was rolling off the fields so thick I could barely see 50 feet in front of the hood. On those back roads, you don't see many people, and you certainly don't see them on foot. About 30 miles outside of a small town called Willow Creek, I started hearing a rhythmic clack. It sounded like a piece of metal hitting the frame. I checked my mirrors, but with the fog and the darkness, I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. I figured a strap had come loose, or maybe I'd picked up some debris. I pulled over at a gravel turnout to check the load. I did a full walk around with my heavy-duty flashlight. Everything was tight. The chains were secure. The tarp hadn't budged, and the tires were fine. I even crawled partially underneath the trailer to check the tandem sliders. Nothing. I climbed back into the cab, chalked it up to the wind, and kept driving. But as soon as I hit 50 miles an hour, the sound changed. It wasn't a clack anymore. It was a scrape. A slow, deliberate scraping sound, like somebody was dragging a heavy boot against the underside of the cab floor. I turned the radio off. The silence in the cab made the sound 10 times louder. Scrape. Thud. Scrape. It was coming from directly beneath the passenger seat. My heart started to pick up speed. I tried to tell myself it was a mechanical issue, but then I felt the vibration. It wasn't the vibration of the engine. It was the vibration of something moving independently of the truck. I was approaching a well-lit gas station, the first sign of life I'd seen in an hour. I decided I wasn't stopping until I was under those industrial fluorescent lights. As I slowed down to turn into the station, I glanced at my right side convex mirror. That's when I saw it. A hand, pale and filthy, reached out from the darkness underneath the cab and gripped the chrome step. Then a second later, a face peeked out from behind the fairing. The person was tucked between the narrow space between the frame rail and the transmission. He wasn't just a drifter looking for a ride. He was strapped in with bungee cords, staring directly into my mirror with wide, unblinking eyes. I didn't even part. I jumped out of the cab while the truck was still rolling and ran toward the station attendant, screaming for them to call the police. I didn't look back. I stood inside the glass-walled store, watching my truck. The man didn't run. He didn't try to hide. He slowly unhooked himself, dropped onto the pavement, and stood there in the middle of the gas station lot. He was wearing a high-visibility vest that looked exactly like mine. He stood perfectly still, looking at the driver's side door of my truck, as if waiting for me to get back in. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, he was gone, but they found something that made the lead officer go pale. In the grease and the dirt of my frame rail, the man had carved a series of tally marks into the metal. There were 14 marks. The officer asked me how long I'd been on this trip. I told him I had left my house 14 days ago. This person hadn't just hopped on at the last rest stop. He had been under there, or near me, for the entire duration of my haul across the states. I sold that truck a month later. I couldn't sit in that seat anymore knowing he'd been inches beneath my feet for 2 weeks. I still haul, but I never pull over at night unless it's a high security stop, and every time I hear a rock hit the floor of my cab, I have to pull over. I have to check the frame. I know the police didn't find him, and I know he still has that high-vis vest. I just wonder if he's found a new frame to call home. I was living alone at the time in a small one-bedroom apartment above a closed dental office. It was cheap, quiet, and perfect for my night schedule. At first, nothing seemed wrong, but the silence in that place felt padded, like sounds didn't move the way they should. The first night it happened, I woke up after 2 a.m. Someone said my name. Not loudly, not softly, just clearly. Hannah. I sat straight up in bed, heart racing, trying to figure out where it came from. It wasn't the hallway. It wasn't outside. It came from the bathroom. The bathroom light was on. I was sure I turned it off before going to sleep. I held my breath and listened. Nothing. I told myself I was half asleep. Stress, overtime, my imagination. I got out of bed, walked to the bathroom, turned the light off, and went back to sleep. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same tone. Hannah. This time, it came from the other side of the bathroom door, right at head level. I didn't answer, didn't move. After a few seconds, the voice spoke again. Why won't you answer me? My stomach dropped. The voice sounded like me. Not exactly, but close enough that it made my skin crawl. I slept with the light on after that. The third night was worse. I woke up to the sound of the bathroom fan running. I never use it. The light was on again, and before I could even sit up, the voice spoke. Hannah, I can hear you breathing. I grabbed my phone and locked myself into my bedroom. I didn't call the police. I didn't know how to explain any of it. The next morning, I told my landlord everything. He went quiet. Then, he told me the last tenant broke their lease suddenly, left in the middle of the night. When I asked why, he hesitated and said, they said someone was talking to them from the bathroom, using their voice. I moved out that week. Before I left, for good, I checked the apartment one last time. The bathroom mirror was fogged, even though the room was cold, and written faintly across the glass, like someone had traced it with their fingertip, was one word. Why? I don't live alone anymore, and I never answer when I hear my name called at night. It was 1993, and I was 12 years old, visiting my mom's townhouse in Rialto, California. I didn't live there anymore. I was in foster care at the time, but my mom was allowed visitations on the weekend. My sister Nicole had just moved back home after a rough time in her life. She was trying to start fresh. The townhouse was small, beige carpet, narrow staircase, a living room that always felt a little too quiet. That night, it was just us kids. Nicole sat on the couch, flipping through channels, the glow of the TV dancing across the walls. Then she flinched, hard. "Stop it," she said. But no one was behind her. A few seconds later, her head jerked again. Something had pulled her hair. I saw it. The room went cold, the kind of cold that sinks into your chest. Mark, our older brother, came out of the kitchen. He was 19 at the time, the oldest of 6. When he saw Nicole shaking, he didn't laugh. He just looked serious and said, "If something's here, we're going to deal with it." He went into his room and came back holding an old Ouija board. I begged him not to use it, but he said, if it wants attention, it's got it. We turned off the TV, 2 candles flickering on the coffee table. Mark placed his fingers on the planchette, then motioned for us to join. "Who's here with us?" he asked. At first, nothing. Then slowly, the planchette started to move. J, Joey. That's Nicole's twin, her brother who had died as a baby. Nicole whispered, "Joey, is that you?" The planchette stopped, then moved again. N-O-T. Then it spelled it out. Not Joey. Right then, one of the candles went out. Nicole pressed her hand against her neck. "It's freezing. It's right behind me." Mark's voice dropped low. "You're not welcome here," he said. "Leave this house." The planchette began spinning, faster and faster, until it flew off the board and hit the wall. The lights flickered, then went completely dark. For just a few seconds in the blackness, I saw a small shadow behind Nicole, still watching. When the lights came back, Nicole was crying. Mark wrapped the Ouija board around a black t-shirt and burned it outside near the fence. When he came back in, he said only one thing: "That wasn't Joey. Don't ever talk to it again." And we never did. But sometimes, when I think back to that townhouse, I swear I can still feel the cold air and remember the letters sliding across the board. N-O-T. J-O-E-Y. I've spent a lot of time at the cabin. It was always quiet, peaceful, and familiar. That's why this still bothers me. One evening, a buddy and I decided, on a whim, to go up there for a fishing trip. We packed light: hot dogs, buns, breakfast for the morning, nothing fancy. We left late, just before sunset, and by the time we arrived, it was already dark. We were unloading the truck when one of us said, "This would be better with beer." The nearest town was only 5 minutes away, but the store was closing soon. We rushed out, grabbed a couple cases, and figured we'd get gas in the morning. We didn't think about it much at the time. Back at the cabin, we got a fire going, hot dogs roasting, just talking about random things. At some point, I realized my buddy had gone completely quiet. He was staring past me, towards the back of the cabin. Then he said, very calmly, "Someone's standing there." I turned around immediately. There was nothing. No movement, no sound. He shook his head. "They're hiding." I didn't want him spiraling, so I grabbed a flashlight and walked behind the cabin. I checked the trees, the shadows, everything. Nothing. No shapes, no sounds. Still, he was shaken, so we went inside. I started the generator and put an old Mighty Joe Young just to have noise in the room. Something normal, something grounding. We watched the entire movie. When it ended, I stood by the TV waiting for the tape to rewind. That's when I heard the knocking. Not on the door, on the window behind my friend. I laughed automatically and said, "Why are you knocking on the window?" He didn't laugh back. He turned pale and said, "That wasn't me." I figured maybe someone pulled up on the road. People sometimes stop by the cabin. I pulled the curtain back. No one. No headlights, no vehicles, just the empty road. Then came knocking at the door. I opened it. No one there. We locked the door. The knocking started again. Window. Another window. Then the door. Not random. It felt deliberate, like whoever it was knew exactly where we were sitting. I grabbed an axe and we circled the cabin. Nothing. Just our truck sitting in the driveway. By then, my buddy was breaking down, crying, begging me to take us home. That's when I realized the problem. We only had about a quarter tank of gas, maybe enough to get halfway back, not enough to risk the full drive. I suggested grabbing my rifle from the truck, anything to make us feel safer, But once we were back inside, the knocking started again. Moving. Window to window, door to wall. Slow and patient. I finally snapped and went outside. I fired a couple shots into the trees, warning shots, hoping it would scare off whoever it was. It didn't. The knocking continued. At some point, I fell asleep. My friend didn't. He told me later it went on through the night and eventually turned into heavy thuds against the wall of the cabin. At first light, we left. No breakfast, no fishing. We stopped for gas and drove straight home. We never found out who was out there. But when I told my parents what happened, my dad went quiet. Then he said, "That happened to me once too." My aunt later said it happened to her during the day, while others were inside the cabin. Same knocking, same walls, same place. I still go to the woods, but I don't sit by the fire at night anymore. Because now I know, sometimes the woods don't stay quiet. Sometimes they knock. Welcome back to the fire. I'm Ace, and these are true stories sent in by people who thought that backyard camping was the safest way to enjoy the outdoors. No long drives to the mountains, no wild animals, just a tent, a fence, and a few thin walls of canvas between them and whatever was out there in the dark. Tonight, you'll hear 3 real experiences from people who camped just a few steps from their own back doors and still ended up wishing they'd stayed inside. So grab your blanket, stare into the flames, and listen close. Because after these stories, you might never look at your backyard the same way again. Our first story comes from Jenna, who thought that her backyard campout would be a quiet night alone with her and her little brother, until something started imitating their voices from the trees. Jenna was 19 when her parents left town for the weekend. It was supposed to be a simple arrangement. She'd watch her 12-year-old brother Milo. They'd order pizza, play games, maybe watch a movie. But Milo had other plans. He had just joined the Scouts and become obsessed with camping. When he found out the forecast was clear, he begged and begged Jenna to let him sleep in the tent in the backyard. "Come on, Jenna. It's basically still in the house. We can use the Wi-Fi from out there. Please?" She didn't love the idea, but their backyard was big and fenced, and they lived on the edge of a wooded green belt. No streets, just a stretch of trees behind their house. Jenna finally said, "Fine, but I'm staying out there with you. And if anything weird happens, we're going inside. Deal?" Milo agreed instantly. They set the tent up near the tree line, where the grass met the shadows of the woods. The inside looked cozy once they settled in. Sleeping bags, pillows, a lantern hanging from the ceiling loop. By 11, they were both in their bags, phones out, the glow lighting their faces. The sounds of the night were loud here. Crickets, the occasional hoot from an owl, leaves whispering against each other in the breeze. At some point, Milo fell asleep mid-video, phone still in hand. Jenna took it, set it aside, and turned off the lantern. She lay there in the dark, listening. That's when she thought she heard someone say her name, soft, almost like a whisper. "Jenna." She sat up slowly, heart giving a nervous little jump. The backyard was dim. Some light filtered through the thin fabric of the tent. She listened carefully. Nothing. She told herself it was just the wind, maybe a neighbor with the TV on, sound carrying strangely at night. She lay back down. A minute later, she heard it again. Only this time, it was cleaner, closer. "Jenna." It sounded like Milo's voice. She rolled onto her side to face him. He was curled up, breathing slowly, completely asleep. "Milo," she whispered. "Did you say something?" No response, just steady, sleepy breathing. Her skin prickled. Maybe one of his friends was messing around, she thought. Maybe someone had snuck into the backyard. She unzipped the tent part way and peeked out. The backyard was still. The porch light was on, casting a triangle of dim gold light across the grass. The trees at the back stood like a tall, dark wall. No movement, no giggles, no one crouching in the shadows. She zipped the tent back up. A few minutes passed. "Jenna." Her stomach dropped. This time, the voice came from just beyond the tent, near the trees, and again, it sounded exactly like Milo. "You're not funny," she muttered more to herself than anyone. Then she heard another voice. "Milo." It was her voice, Jenna's own voice, but wrong, like it was being played through a cheap speaker or repeated by someone who didn't quite know how to talk. It came from the same spot, out by the trees. "Milo, come here." Jenna froze, every instinct screaming at her to wake him up and go inside. But another part of her wanted to see what was out there, to prove to herself it was a prank or a neighbor's TV or anything normal. She slowly sat up and shook Milo's shoulder. "Hey, wake up." He blinked, disoriented. "What time is it?" "Late. Listen." They sat in silence, the night pressing against the thin tent walls. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, faintly, "Jenna." Milo's eyes widened. "That sounded like you," she finished. Then they both heard it. Her voice again, just outside the tent now. "Milo, come here. I want to show you something." The way it bent her words, too smooth on some syllables, too harsh on others, made her stomach twist. Milo whispered, "That's not funny. Stop." "It's not me," Jenna hissed. He looked at her, saw she was serious, and that's when he started to panic. The voice came again, a little louder, almost playful. "Milo, Jenna, come to the trees." Jenna grabbed her phone with shaking hands and turned on the flashlight. "On 3, we run to the house, okay?" she said. Milo nodded, already breathing fast. 1, 2, the voice cut in, louder, directly outside the tent now. "Don't run." Whatever was out there slammed a hand against the side of the tent, the fabric bowed inward, brushing against Jenna's shoulder. The impact sent the lantern hook rattling above them. Milo screamed. They bolted for the zipper, practically tearing it open, cold air rushing in as they tumbled out onto the grass. Jenna yanked Milo to his feet. The porch light suddenly flickered, once, twice, and went dead. The backyard plunged into darkness. Her phone's flashlight beam shook wildly as she pointed it towards the trees. For a second, she saw nothing but trunks and underbrush. Then, between 2 trees, something moved. Not a person, not exactly. It was a shape, a patch of darkness that seemed darker than everything else around it, like a hole cut into the night itself. As her light shook over it, it didn't show a face, or clothes, or anything. But when the beam passed over where the head should have been, she heard her own voice again. Soft this time, almost affectionate. "Jenna." She didn't wait to hear more. She dragged Milo with her, both of them sprinting for the back door, slipping on the grass. She fumbled with the handle, shoved it open, and they stumbled into the kitchen, slamming it behind them. The house felt suffocatingly quiet. Jenna locked the door and every other door in the house, hands shaking. They turned on every light they could find. For the rest of the night, they sat on the couch, wrapped in blankets, TV playing some comedy they weren't even really watching. Around 2 a.m, Jenna's phone buzzed. She looked down. It was a notification from their home security app, the kind their parents use more for show than necessity. Backyard camera, motion detected. Her blood ran cold. She opened the app with shaking fingers and tapped on the most recent clip. The video began grainy, black and white. The camera was aimed toward the yard, showing the tent slightly sagging, grass moving gently in the breeze. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, from the tree line, something stepped forward. The motion sensor blurred it, like it couldn't quite decide what it was recording. The outline was vaguely human, but twisted, like all the proportions were just a little wrong. Arms too long, shoulders too narrow. As it moved closer, the audio picked up a sound. Jenna's voice. Not from the speaker, not from inside the house, but from outside, where the shape was. "Jenna, Milo, come to the trees." Milo whimpered beside her. The shape stopped halfway between the trees and the tent. Then, slowly, it turned to face the camera. The video glitched for a second, static distortion, and then when the image returned, the shape was gone. The clip ended. Jenna didn't sleep for the rest of the weekend. She didn't tell her parents everything when they got back, just that they heard noises and got scared and came inside. But she did show them the video. Her dad frowned, said it must have been the neighbors or a camera glitch or a trick of the lighting. Her mom suggested turning the camera slightly or changing the motion sensitivity. They did both. What they didn't do was camp in the backyard again. Jenna still has the clip saved on her phone. Now and then she rewatches it, slowing it down, pausing it frame by frame. She swears that in one single frame, just one, you can see a clearer shape. And whatever it is, it looks like it's smiling. This next story is from Ethan, and it's about what he saw standing on the edge of his yard, long after everyone else had gone to sleep. Ethan was 16 the first time his parents actually encouraged him to camp out. They lived in a quiet suburb, streetlights, trimmed lawns, nosy neighbors, the kind of place where nothing really happens. So when Ethan asked if he could pitch a tent in the backyard with his best friend Tyler, his mom didn't hesitate. "Back door stays unlocked," she said. "Phone stays on. If you hear anything weird, just come inside. No heroes." He laughed it off, but the last part stuck with him. No heroes. They set up the tent near the back fence, away from the porch light. It was one of those cheap dome tents you get at a big box store, with thin fabric and a zipper that never really quite closed. By 10 p.m., they were zipped inside, sleeping bags arranged, flashlight in the middle, a pile of snacks between them. They scrolled through horror stories on their phone, taking turns reading them in overly dramatic voices, trying to scare each other. Ironically, none of those stories were as scary as what actually happened. Around midnight, the neighborhood went quiet. The distant traffic faded. Even the dog 2 houses over finally stopped barking. That's when Ethan first heard it, a soft, deliberate crunch in the grass. He glanced at Tyler. Tyler was still on his back, earbuds in, watching a video. Ethan muted his phone and listened. Another crunch. Closer this time. Not the random rustling of a breeze. This sounded like footsteps. He turned off his phone completely, letting the tent sink into a full darkness except for the dim glow bleeding through the thin fabric from the neighbor's porch light. "Dude," Ethan whispered, "hold up." Tyler pulled out his earbuds. "What?" "Someone's out there." They both held their breath. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, as if whoever or whatever was out there had been waiting for absolute silence. Crunch. Crunch. Footsteps, slow, heavy, moving along the side of the tent. The sound stopped right by Ethan's head. He could hear the faint rasp of breathing through the fabric. Every instinct told him to say something, but his mouth went dry. Tyler finally whispered, barely audible, "Is that your dad?" Ethan swallowed. "My dad's on the night shift. He's not home." The breathing outside the tent shifted. Whoever was there took one more slow step, and Ethan saw the shape of a shoe press lightly into the side of the tent near his face. And that was when Tyler did the bravest and dumbest thing he could have done. He whispered louder this time. "Who's out there?" Everything went still. The breathing stopped. The pressure against the tent vanished. For 3 full seconds, there was absolute silence. Then, from the other side of the thin fabric, right above their heads, someone chuckled. It wasn't a laugh, not a full, genuine one. Just a low, ugly sound, like someone who had just heard a private joke. Ethan's heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his throat. Tyler whispered, "Nope, I'm out." He lunged for the zipper, fumbling in the dark, the metal teeth snagging once, twice, before finally giving away. Cold air rushed in as they spilled out of the tent and sprinted for the back door. Behind them, in the blackness of the yard, they heard a voice speak clearly for the first time. "Didn't mean to scare you, boys." The way he said it, it sounded exactly the opposite. They burst through the back door, slamming it shut. Ethan's mom was already halfway down the hallway, robe on, eyes wide. "What happened?" With shaky breaths, they told her someone was in the backyard. She flipped on the floodlights and looked through the sliding glass door. The backyard glowed a white, harsh light. The tent stood there, half collapsed, one side drooping where Ethan had shoved through. The grass near the tent was clearly flattened in a curved path, footprints stamped in the dew. Near the fence, just beyond the reach of the floodlight, something moved. A man stepped into view, one hand raised to shield his eyes from the glare. He was tall, wearing faded jeans and a jacket that looked too big for him. His hair was messy, his face half-shadowed. "Evening," he called out. Ethan's mom slid the door open just a crack. "Who are you? What are you doing in my yard?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Just passing through and saw the tent. Thought maybe the boys were out here all alone. Wanted to make sure they were safe." Ethan's mom's voice hardened. "You need to leave. I'm calling the police." The man lifted both hands like he was surrendering. "Hey, I get it. No harm meant." He backed up slowly, step by step, until he reached the fence. And that's when Ethan realized something that made his stomach drop. The gate was on the other side of the yard. This man hadn't used the gate. He had climbed over the fence to get in, and now he swung his one leg over it again, like he'd done it 100 times before. Before he dropped down on the other side, he looked directly at Ethan through the glass door and said, "You boys should zip your tent up all the way next time. Lots of weirdos out at night." Then he was gone. The police came. They walked the yard, checked the alley, shined their flashlights along the fence line. They found scuffed wood where the man had climbed over, and cigarette butts tucked into the corner by the fence, like someone had been standing there many nights before, smoking and watching. But that was it. No name, no car, no reason he should have known that there were 2 teenage boys sleeping outside at night. Ethan says he's never camped in his backyard again. They kept the tent, but after that, it only ever went up in organized campgrounds, with other people and bright lanterns all around. Even now, years later, when he visits his parents and looks at the backyard, he can't help imagining a figure standing just beyond the fence, listening to him breathe through the thin fabric. Not every threat in the dark is supernatural. Sometimes it's just a stranger who shouldn't be there, and that's scary enough. Our last story tonight comes from Mark, who learned that sometimes the danger isn't at the edge of the yard, but right above your head. Mark and his wife Leela moved into their first house together in late summer. It was a small place with peeling paint and uneven floors, but it had a big selling point, a wide private backyard. The first thing Mark did after they moved in was buy a fire pit. He'd grown up camping and wanted to bring a little bit of that feeling home. It became their tradition. Every Friday night, they'd sit by the fire, roast marshmallows, and talk about their week. One particular Friday, Leela suggested something different. "We should sleep outside," she said, "like a mini vacation. Just one night in the tent." Mark loved the idea. They set up not far from the house, where the grass was softest. The tent faced away from the back door, towards the fence and the shadows. From where they lay, they could just see the upstairs bedroom if they craned their necks. They roasted marshmallows until late, then finally doused the fire and crawled back into their tent, the smell of smoke clinging to their clothes. Inside it was warm and quiet. Leela fell asleep quickly, her breathing slow and steady. Mark thought and laid awake. New house noises still made him uneasy. The distant pop of cooling wood, the faint hum of the old refrigerator through the wall, the way the wind made the eaves creak. He checked his phone. Almost 1 a.m. He was just starting to drift off when he heard something. A faint creak, like a window opening. He opened his eyes. Through the thin tent mesh, he could see the outline of their house against the sky. The upstairs bedroom window, one they had closed earlier, now looked different. It was darker. The reflection of the streetlight was gone. He squinted. The window was open. He sat up slowly, carefully not to wake Leela. He told himself he must have forgotten to lock it. Maybe the old latch had slipped. Old houses did weird things. He lay back down, closing his eyes. A few minutes later, he heard another sound. Soft, deliberate footsteps from inside the house. They moved from the bedroom above, across the floorboards, to the top of the stairs. Mark held his breath. Another step, and another. The sound descending carefully, as if whoever was walking was trying not to be heard, but the old wood betrayed him with each creak. He glanced at the back door. It was out of sight of the tent around the corner of the house. He couldn't see if it was open or closed. "Leela," he whispered. "Hey." She stirred. What?" "Do you hear that?" They both listened. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs, then stopped. The house went quiet again. Mark swallowed. "I think someone's inside." That woke her fully. "What do you mean, someone?" she whispered. He considered calling the police, but what would he say? "Hi, I'm camping in the backyard and heard noises in my own house." He decided to take a look first. Just peek. If anything seemed off, he'd call. He unzipped the tent halfway and crawled out, the night air cool against his skin. He stood up slowly, eyes fixed on the back door. It was closed. The kitchen light was off. Everything looked normal. He took one step towards the house. Then he froze. Something moved in the upstairs window. He looked up. The bedroom light was off, but there was just enough illumination from the street lamp to outline a figure standing there. A person, in his bedroom, silhouetted against the faint glow. They were very still, just standing at the glass, looking out over the yard, looking down at him. Mark couldn't see a face, just a shape of head, shoulders, and arms. The figure was slightly turned, as if he had just noticed him. He took a step back. Behind him, he heard Leela unzip the tent. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He just pointed up. She followed his gaze and immediately grabbed his arm, nails digging into his skin. "Who is that?" she hissed. The figure didn't move. Mark dug his phone out of his pocket. With shaky hands dialed 911. As he explained in a low voice what he was seeing, the figure finally shifted. Slowly, it raised one hand and waved. Not a frantic wave, not a friendly one. Just a slow, deliberate motion, side to side. Mark's breath caught in his throat. The dispatcher told him to stay outside, stay online. Officers were on the way. Minutes passed like hours. They watched the window the whole time. The figure stayed there, just standing, just watching. Sirens finally approached, growing louder until red and blue lights splashed across the street out front. The silhouette disappeared from the window. 2 officers came around the side gate, guns holstered but hands close. Mark pointed up, voice shaky. "There's someone up in the bedroom. They were just standing there, watching us." The officers exchanged a look. One stayed with them in the yard while the other one used Mark's key to go inside. They listened as the cop moved through the house. "Clear," he called from room to room. Footsteps upstairs, more doors opening and closing. After a few minutes, he appeared at the back door and stepped out. "Nobody's inside," he said. "Every door is locked, windows too." Mark frowned. "That's impossible. The bedroom was open. We saw it. We saw them." The officer shook his head. "It's shut now, and latched, I checked." They insisted he check again. He did. This time, he had Mark come with him. The bedroom looked exactly as they'd left it. Half unpacked boxes, clothes on a chair, the bed slightly messy. The window was closed. Mark walked over and touched it. The lock was old, but firmly in place. There was no scratches on the frame, no signs of forced entry. The dust on the sill looked undisturbed, except for one faint line, about the width of a finger, dragged slowly along the sill, as if somebody had traced it from one side to the other. The officer shrugged it off. "Maybe a reflection, or you saw your own shadow. New place, new sound, being outside at night, you can play tricks." They left after a while, assuring Mark and Lita to call again if they saw anything. That night, they didn't go back into the tent. They slept in the bedroom, door locked, phone on the nightstand. Mark lay awake for hours, watching the window, waiting for the faint outline of a stranger to appear again. He never did. But the next morning, when he went outside to put the tent away, he noticed something he wished he hadn't. On the grass, directly below the bedroom window, the dew was disturbed. 2 long partial marks in the wet blades of grass, about shoulder width apart, like somebody had dropped down from the window and steadied themselves with their hands. The ground was soft enough to take impressions, but there was no footprints leading to or away from the spot. Just the 2 handprints and the memory of a faceless figure watching from above. Mark says they still use the backyard. They still like the fire pit, but they never sleep out there anymore. And every night, before they lock up, he checks that bedroom window twice. Not because he's afraid it'll open, but because he's afraid the window will be closed, and someone will be standing there on the other side of the glass. I had just moved into a small rental house on the edge of town. One of those older places that creak when you walk, but feel calm during the day. It had everything I needed. Quiet street, cheap rent, a big fenced yard for my shepherd mix Max. The landlord told me the basement was mostly used for storage, but the door didn't open easily. Old wood, humidity, so I kept it shut. The first night, Max started acting off. He sat in front of the basement door, ears perked, tail stiff, growling under his breath. I laughed and told him to relax. New smells, new house, he'd settle down. But he didn't. By the 3rd night, he refused to sleep. He'd sit there for hours, eyes fixed on the same spot. Every time I called his name, he'd look at me, then back at the crack beneath the door, like he was waiting for something. That's when I heard it. A soft, uneven tapping. Tap. 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 It was so faint, I thought I imagined it. I held my breath. Then it came again. Closer. This time like fingernails brushing wood. I told myself it was just the pipes. Or maybe mice. Still, I grabbed a flashlight. As soon as I touched the doorknob, Max lunged, shoved himself between me and the door, teeth bared. He'd never done that before. His growl deepened, and in that same moment, the tapping moved, from the middle of the door to the other side, dragging upward in long, slow scratches. I froze. There shouldn't have been anything down there. I didn't open the door that night. Neither of us slept. When daylight finally came, I forced the swollen door open. The air that came out was thick, damp, smelled like old dirt, and something rotten. The beam from the flashlight caught the inside of the door, covered in claw marks. Fresh ones, splintered deep into the wood, still shedding tiny curls of dust. A week later, I broke my lease. When I told the landlord why, he didn't look surprised, just sighed. Said the last tenant kept their dog in the basement during storms. It had died down there trying to claw its way out. Sometimes, when the house settles at night, I still hear the same rhythm, tap, tap, tap. And I wonder if Max was never growling at the door, but at whatever was behind it. Luna was a perfect cat. Quiet, curious, black as midnight. The kind that sleeps all day and curls up on your chest when you're sad. I adopted her my second year of college, and for months she was my shadow. If I was studying, she was on the desk. If I was sleeping, she was at my feet. Then, one night, around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of her hissing. She was in the hallway, fur raised, tail puffed, eyes locked on the ceiling corner. There was nothing there. I called her name. She didn't look away. Just that low guttural hiss the cats make when you're watching something you can't see. I pulled out my phone and started recording, thinking it'd be funny later. But when I played it back in the morning, there was a whisper. It said her name softly, drawn out. Luna, Luna. I replayed it 10 times. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't any voice I recognized. From that night on, Luna changed. She'd stare into the hallway and growl, ears pinned back, tail twitching. Sometimes she'd chase things that weren't there, dart into the darkness, then freeze, eyes tracking something I couldn't see. I tried to laugh it off, told friends it was cat stuff, but I started keeping the hallway light on at night. Eventually, I decided to move apartments. The last night before leaving, I left the front door open while I packed. Luna sat at the threshold, crying this deep, broken sound. Not her usual meow, almost like she was trying to warn me. I picked her up, but she went completely limp, staring straight past me into the hall. I looked. Nothing. When I turned back, she was trembling, claws digging into my shirt. The next morning, I carried her to the car, still shaking. She wouldn't settle down during the drive, just stared out the window, tail twitching. When we finally pulled up to the new apartment, I opened the carrier, expecting her to bolt inside. Instead, she froze, looked back at the car, then towards the old place down the road, like she could still see it. I lifted her gently, set her down just inside the doorway. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped in, cautious, tense, and finally curled up underneath the couch. That night was the first night she slept peacefully in weeks. But every now and then, when the house is quiet, she'll sit up suddenly, ears flickering, and stare at the empty hallway, like she's waiting for something that followed us. My uncle was one of those eccentric people. Funny, loud, always talking to his parrot like it was a human. When he passed away, his family didn't want the bird, so I took it. A green Amazon parrot named Jasper. I figured it'd be some company. He was clever. He could mimic the microwave, the phone, even snippets of songs. For a few days, it was comforting. The sound of life in a quiet house. Then, one night, I heard it say in my uncle's voice, "Hey buddy," exactly the same tone, same warmth. It made me smile until the next night. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a whisper. Not the parrot's usual squawk, a whisper. I got up, walked into the living room. Jasper was wide awake, head tilted. Then he said, still in my uncle's voice, "Don't go downstairs." My house doesn't have a downstairs. Over the next week, he started saying other things. Stuff I'd said on the phone, private things, phrases I'd whispered to myself. Once he mimicked my voice saying, "I'm tired of being alone." I hadn't said that out loud in years. Sometimes at night, I'd hear him carrying on both sides of a conversation, one in my uncle's voice, the other in mine, back and forth, soft, like he was practicing a duet that only he understood. Then one morning, I walked into the living room and the cage door was open. Jasper sat on the back of the couch, watching me. He tilted his head and said quietly, "You're next." I froze. He didn't move. When I blinked, he was gone. The cage was empty. The window was still closed. All that remained was a single green feather on my nightstand the next morning. Sometimes I still hear him. A faint whistle from the next room. The sound of my own voice, repeating words I'd never said out loud. I used to camp alone a lot. One weekend, late September, I hiked a few miles into a clearing I'd used before, a little flat spot above a creek. I boiled water, made ramen, and a cup of tea before bed. Around 10, I cleaned everything, turned my mug upside down on a rock by the fire, and went to sleep. I woke up once in the night, maybe 2:30, but it was silent except for the creek. When I got up for real, it was dawn, gray and cold. I unzipped the tent and froze. My mug was sitting upright again, half full of tea. I didn't remember pouring it. The tea bag string was tied neatly around the handle, and the liquid inside was dark, still, no steam. I picked it up. It wasn't warm. Around the fire pit, someone had arranged small twigs in a perfect circle, all pointing inward. My food bag was untouched, my gear exactly where I left it. But whoever did that had been close enough to reach the mug beside my fire. I tried to convince myself it was me. Maybe I had made a second cup and forgotten. But when I packed up, the tea bag was gone, lifted out, like it had been removed carefully. I left within minutes. On the drive home, I kept replaying it in my head. The half-empty mug, the circle of sticks. A friend later told me, if somebody wanted to hurt you, they would have. Whoever it was, they just wanted you to know they were there. I haven't been camping alone since. My wife and I spent a weekend backpacking in Glacier National Park. We hiked about 12 miles in, no service, no other tents around. The only flat ground was between two tall, dead pine trees. We joked about them falling overnight. Around 4 a.m., thunder woke us up. The wind hit so hard, the tent poles bent. Rain slammed the fly. Every flash of lightning lit the forest like a strobe. Between flashes, I swear I saw a figure standing near the trees. Too tall, too still. My wife whispered, "Do you hear that?" It wasn't thunder, it was cracking wood. One of the dead trees split from top to bottom, but it didn't fall. When the flash came again, the figures were gone. After the storm, I stepped outside. Mud everywhere, but near the trees were tracks, bare, long, with no toes. Just smooth impressions like someone had pressed down with flat boards. We packed up in silence and started hiking out before sunrise. Every time the wind moved behind us, we both turned, certain someone was following us. When we reached the ranger station that afternoon, the sky was clear, the storm already miles away. The rangers said no one else had signed in for that trail in 3 days. I looked back at the ridge once before I left. The two dead trees were still standing, black and twisted. But I kept thinking about those shapes in the flashes and how they seemed to move closer each time the light went out. was camping alone off an old Forest Service road. Just me, a hammock, and a tarp. The night was quiet. No cars for miles. I fell asleep listening to crickets and woke up to a sharp ripping sound. My hammock collapsed beneath me. My tarp was flapping open, slashed clean through in straight lines. My backpack was gone. My knife sheath was empty. I found the knife 10 feet away, buried upright in the dirt. Someone had stuck it there, point down, perfectly vertical. I shone my headlamp around, expecting to see eyes or a shadow. Nothing, just still trees and the sound of my own breathing. I grabbed what was left of my gear and started walking toward the road. I didn't even bother with the light most of the way. I just kept on moving until the trees opened up. I waited by the gravel shoulder until dawn. A ranger eventually stopped. We went back together. The hammock, the tarp, the knife, everything was gone. Even the rope marks on the trees looked scrubbed out. The ranger said it was probably vandals, but there weren't any tire tracks or footprints. Just two trees standing side by side, bark cut in the same clean vertical lines as my tarp. I still have a hammock, but I never used it again. Thanks for watching. If you have a true story, send it to acestruestories@gmail.com. If you have an idea for a future video, leave a comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, there's always another story.